Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, January 28th, and 2025, and our friend Laith Marouf is back with us. Welcome back, Laith.
Great to be with you, Nima.
So happy to have you back. I've learned that you've just came back from the southern part of Lebanon, and and I saw the video that you've shared with me. Tell us, what did you see? What's happening right now in the southern Lebanon?
So, on the 26th of January was the end of the supposed ceasefire between the Zionists and the resistance that was negotiated and guaranteed by the Americans and the French and the UNIFIL. And the Israelis actually were still occupying the southern villages in Lebanon. And so the actual residents of the south went by themselves, unarmed, using their bodies to try to liberate their own land. And what happened is we watched as thousands upon thousands of Lebanese people descended on their villages, and they were kind of almost blocked by the Lebanese military, and many of them had abandoned their cars and just crossed the Lebanese military and UNIFIL barricades and walked into their villages, thousands upon thousands. And so the Zionists had kind of a freak out moment, and they started by shooting on the civilians across these villages. And the first day, 18 civilians were martyred, and 100 and somewhat were injured. But the Israelis withdrew immediately from most of the villages under the pressure of these Lebanese civilians going back to their homes, and the pressure mounted on the Lebanese army that in some incidents we saw the Lebanese military actually moving either in front of or behind the civilians as they entered their villages by the second day of these marches of return. And remember, this coincided at the same time with the beginnings of the marches of return in Gaza and the commemorations of the Auschwitz liberation of the extermination camp of Auschwitz. This was a historical moment. We saw the heroism of both the people in Gaza, but also here in Lebanon, in the face of such enemy that is bent on killing unarmed civilians and looting lands. And as from these images that we're seeing, this is the library from one of the villages that we visited on the south that was clearly desecrated and destroyed by the occupying forces for just the hell of it. And much of these villages that we saw were all destroyed in the period of the ceasefire, because the Zionist military was not able to occupy any of these villages when the resistance was ongoing. Only when the ceasefire happened, we saw the advancement of the Zionists into these villages and the mass destruction of their residential buildings and their civilian infrastructure, and looting. In fact, we went into homes and businesses that clearly were stripped of all of their belongings. These Zionists were looting the houses, these soldiers, and we watched as also, of course, many families were digging in their homes and finding the remains of their relatives that were killed during this war, that were buried under the rubble, and nobody was able to retrieve them since the beginning of the war. And now we also saw yesterday the miraculous exit of one of the Hezbollah fighters, a young man in his early 20s, that was in the village, barricaded for 2 months under occupation of Israeli forces in this quote unquote ceasefire, and was there on the front line since the beginning of the attempted invasion. So this young man was able to survive for more than 4 months. And he came out and people helped him out, and he was clearly covered in dust and needed medical aid. So we saw a lot of amazing, heroic actions by the Lebanese people, and the shame of the Lebanese government and Lebanese army that didn't deliver on their duties, and the you know, monstrous behavior of the Zionists against the unarmed civilians. Since then, the Zionists and the Americans have attempted to extend the ceasefire. In fact, supposedly, Trump's advisors called the Lebanese government and asked them to extend the ceasefire, meaning the ability of the Zionists to just destroy more of South Lebanon, till the February 27th. So it was going to supposedly coincide with the end of the ceasefire in Gaza. And the Lebanese government rejected this under, of course, pressure from the civilians that enacted the liberation and the end of the ceasefire and delivering on the agreement that was promised. And now the American government is saying they want Israel to be able to stay there until February 16th. But as we see, the Lebanese civilians are not afraid, and they will not wait for neither the failed government that is not delivering on its duties and or the world to give them the liberation of their hometowns.
Can you tell us what's the location of this video?
Yes, this is in Bayda village. It's right on the border. And you know, in this video, we go to many villages like Shaqra and Bayda and Aitrun and others. So you'll see, you know, this mass destruction everywhere. And we saw, you know, some people, we didn't want to put it on video, pulling the remains of their loved ones out of the rubble from many of these villages. And here in Aitarun, in this video, you could see the civilians going in, and there's a tank, and we're with them, and the tank starts shooting on the civilians trying to get back to their village. And you will also see a disabled man on crutches that this tank shot on, and he was martyred. We didn't put the video of his martyrdom. This is the man that was shot just around us. He was one of the 18 that were martyred that day.
Yeah. Laith, do we know what is happening right now with the Israelis and why they have decided not to leave the southern Lebanon? What's the argument on their part?
Well, there's no argument really that they can justify. It's just their nature. Zionism cannot exist without constant massacre and expansionism. And this has been the mode of operandi of Zionism since its creation. And we see, decade after decade, expansionism to territories more and more, whether it's the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza and Jerusalem, and then the Golan Heights, and then Sinai, and then back from Sinai, then South Lebanon, then back from Lebanon, then Syria. This is the nature of Zionism. It cannot exist without constantly genociding the indigenous people that are resisting it, and without clearing more and more lands to protect more and more land behind. Right now the Zionists just declared that they're not going to leave the areas of Syria they recently occupied. They want to declare it a buffer zone. I mean, that was the excuse for occupying the Golan Heights themselves for 60 years almost, So it's now there's a buffer zone for a buffer zone. You see, this is the nature of Zionism. And they can't help themselves but to kill other human beings. And currently, the Zionists have been handed their worst military defeat in their history, even at the huge costs of thousands upon thousands genocided in Gaza and in Lebanon. They were unable to defeat militarily the indigenous people in Palestine and in Gaza after 16 months of genocide and in Lebanon. And as we saw today and yesterday and the day before in Lebanon and in Gaza, they're unable to defeat an unarmed population that is forcefully liberating its land with its flesh. Look at the people in Gaza as these people in South Lebanon were coming back to totally destroyed homes. And there's nothing, no amenities, everything beautiful, desecrated. And still the people insisting on coming back to their land at any cost. And on the other side of the border, in occupied North Palestine, the Zionist settlers are still refusing to go back to the colonies on the border of Lebanon. They're also on the other side, in the south of Palestine, occupied Palestine, on the borders of the extermination camp of Gaza. They're also refusing to go back to those colonies, these Zionists. And that shows you the difference between the indigenous people of the land that have a natural, permanent connection to their land, and those who are colonizers, whose only connection to this land is the fact that the social contract of colonialism to them is to have the right to kill, loot, and colonize under safety. If they don't have the safety to kill, rape, and pillage an indigenous land, they don't dare come to it, and they cease to be any connection to this land between them. It's a contractual thing, colonialism. That is the social contract of colonialism with the citizens of the colony, and Israel cannot deliver it to these colonists, neither on the borders of Lebanon nor on the borders of the extermination camp of Gaza, and therefore the colonists don't come back.
How did the government in Lebanon try to explain the situation in southern Lebanon to the Lebanese people? Because we know that they were in favor of this ceasefire. And how are they responding? How are they trying to convince the people that they're doing whatever they have on their part in order to put some sort of pressure on Israel?
Yeah, I mean, look, there was, because of the spontaneity of the actions of the Lebanese people, and the fact that it wasn't only people of the south that were going down to their villages, the student unions and the student associations called on a general strike and called on all the students to go down, while the universities were refusing to shut down, the private universities and the government universities. The minister refused to call for a day off school, and it still happened. And because of that, we saw pressure mounting on this new government in its first test. This General Joseph Aoun, who led the military and now is the president, and the new prime minister appointed, who was the head of the ICJ, both of them fell under huge amounts of pressure. This was their first test, and they were going to fail it. Okay, and therefore we saw them make statements that are not in full reality of what's happening on the ground. So there's the statement of the new president or the new prime minister elected, where both, supportive of the populations, right, to return to their homes. But we look at the actions of the government, which controls supposedly the military. It didn't call on the military to ride in front of the population and give them protection, or force the UNIFIL also to do so. And only in a few situations where it was clearly a personal decision of the sergeant on a certain location that refused orders to just block people and moved with the population, did we see things happen. And that in itself also probably put huge pressures within the military. Here you have these soldiers who are, for the most part, the largest number of soldiers from any sect in the country are Shia, whether from the south or not. And they are sitting there, and plus like the Christian villages that are occupied and the Christian sites that are destroyed and so forth. So you saw the soldiers themselves not happy to be put in a position that actually increases the danger on their brothers and sisters, Lebanese co-civilians, co-citizens, in the face of the Zionists. So that put a lot of pressure in the country. And the new head of Hezbollah, Sayyid Naim Qasim, gave a speech last night, and I think it was his first speech that the whole country was waiting for to hear. And I think he has captured the moment because he, was conciliatory to the government and the military and gave them space, but was very firm in his threats that if this continues, that any excuse not to have a military resistance to the occupation will have vanished. And we saw all the imperialist kind of captured members of the parliament, dance like crazy around the issue because they were really put in a tight spot by their own masters in the White House.
How does Hezbollah feel right now about Gaza and the situation in Gaza? What are they talking about? Because on one side we see the level of destruction and what has happened to Gaza. On the other hand, we see these people getting back at least to their land, to their part of the northern part of Gaza, which they were living before this conflict started. And how's that? How do they interpret the situation in Gaza?
Yeah, we heard a statement from Hezbollah today saying that the resistance in Gaza has achieved all its goals, and the Aqsa flood has achieved its goals, and that tells you very clearly what Hezbollah thinks. And this is true because remember, Al-Aqsa flood was designed for one purpose. Hamas and the Palestinian resistance groups wanted to capture Israeli military personnel to exchange them for the thousands upon thousands of Palestinians imprisoned in Israeli dungeons. And here we have the exchange is happening, and thousands of Palestinians have already will be released, and therefore the Palestinian resistance has achieved its goal. I know it's illogical maybe when somebody thinks about it, if you're like, oh wow, there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that were killed in for the purpose of releasing thousands of Palestinian prisoners. Is this a logical equation? Well, you have to understand how we believe as Palestinians, as Arabs, as Muslims. We cherish our martyrs, anyone that is killed in the path of justice. But we cherish even more our prisoners that are imprisoned unjustly. Why? Because we see them as living martyrs. They have to live a death every day under the yoke of the occupation forces putting them in their dungeons. They have to be tortured every day. Our martyrs die once. And we have dignity. We don't leave any man or woman behind or child. We will fight if that means even our martyrdom, ourselves. And on the other side, the Zionist objectives in this goal were clear. They wanted to destroy all the Palestinian resistance. They wanted to break the will of the Palestinian people, and they wanted to force them to be expelled from the lands of historic Palestine. Did they achieve any of those goals? They didn't achieve destroying the Palestinian resistance. Today, and those images of the million people walking back to the north of Gaza that have now been enshrined in the human mind, collective mind, that image of dignity, of love for land, of resistance under the most horrific conditions. On the 80th anniversary of the Auschwitz liberation, it is now, those images have erased any possibility for the Zionist to ever have legitimacy to stay in our land, whether from us or any human on this planet. There's no one on this planet that will ever accept the legitimacy of the Zionist colony. It was a victory. It was a tremendous victory. And this is why the Zionists are freaked out and are trying to go on new rampages, because they know they have lost everything.
We know that one of the main goals or objectives of the Israelis during the conflict in Gaza was to destroy Hamas. From the pictures that we've seen so far in the aftermath of ceasefire, was that achieved, in your opinion?
I mean, honest to God, I wasn't expecting this sophisticated production of the release of these Israeli prisoners of war. Do you understand how much it needs for you to have, number one, the stages, the lighting, the banners, the organized marches of the military formations, to the control of the crowd, to the agreement to be signed and printed with the Red Cross, and the gift bags to the Israeli prisoners of war, female prisoner, military personnel, and the media production value of all of this. And of course, we saw the thousands upon thousands of Hamas and Islamic Jihad and other Palestinian resistance groups all lining up and walking with the Palestinian people across the country, across the Gaza territory. This is a clear indication that not only the military formations of Hamas and Islamic Jihad and others are still intact, but their political, their media, their organizing, their civil units, the police were already spread out. The internal Ministry of Internal Security, all its police forces were spread out in minutes across Gaza. The civil defense, everybody is back into full action, and they were opening roads and taking out all the rubble to open paths for people. This is, I tell you, if tomorrow there is an election in Palestine, and which will never happen because Mahmoud Abbas the traitorous collaborator that has been blocking an election since 2006 will not allow it. But if an election today happens, there will be no existence for Fatah and Mahmoud Abbas, not even one seat probably. And the resistance factions, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, PFLP, the FLP, these will take 100% of all the seats, and not the lead of them is Hamas only. And that is because Hamas showed that it's able to defend the Palestinian people, free and liberate thousands of Palestinian prisoners, and crush the hordes of the whole West, and shake the whole planet out of its long sleep under imperialism.
I know that you told me that you came back from southern Lebanon and you couldn't sleep well for days, and we totally understand that. And I know that you're so tired, and I really do appreciate that you gave us a picture about what's going on in southern Lebanon, Laith. And please let our audience know how they can support you and the way that you're trying to inform us from what's going on in that part of the world, which is so much, there is so much chaos there.
Yes, you can go to our website, freepalestine.video, and donate, subscribe to monthly donations. You can follow us on all the platforms we're on. You can also subscribe on Patreon and Substacks. And I want to say that our teams in the West Bank have been doing an amazing job of interviewing each and every Palestinian prisoner that is being released. And we have interviewed more than any Arabic or English media on the planet. Almost everybody we can reach. You will hear the stories of these prisoners, some of them that have been 45 years and longer. And these amazing and brave journalists, young men and women, we are trying to train and hire as many of the youth as we can possibly do. These young men and women are under constant threat, including one of our journalists was shot at the day before yesterday in the refugee camp in Tol Karim, amongst other journalists. Luckily, she has not been injured, but our journalists are arrested by the Palestinian Collaborative Authority and attacked and held by the Israeli military. And as you see here in Lebanon, also we're under threat. All of this is done so we can bring as much of the first-hand story for the people around the world in English, and no one else is doing this. And we're covering the seldom talked about stories. You hear me here making all these commentaries, but when you go to freepalestine.video and follow us on our platforms, you'll see news, journalist production, not opinion, and you'll see firsthand on the ground what's happening in these locations like no other place. Please, support us and share our content. Freepalestine.video is the website.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Laith.
Thank you for having me, Nima. Talk to you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.